Time for the Property Podcast, where every week tens of thousands of property investors, new and experienced, join together to get news, knowledge and laughs at our expense. With me, Rob Bence.
And me, Rob Dix. Join us every Thursday morning for your weekly dose of property ideas and motivation. Then head over to our website at thepropertypodcast.com to keep the conversation going. Now though, let's get started.
Happy New Year!
Happy New Year!
Hello everyone and welcome to the Property Podcast episode 42, and we've got a super special, excellent, incredible, lots of other exciting words episode for you. We want to start off the year with a bang, and boy are we giving you a bang. This is a great episode we've got coming up. Lots of experts involved, lots of opinion, probably a few arguments, maybe a few tears. But we'll come to the main show bit in a bit.
Sounds like my Christmas, Rob.
Yeah. We won't be talking about what you've done over Christmas, Rob. Should we keep it to property stuff?
Let's do our best. Well, let's start with something non-contentious. Oh, we should have said to start with, price predictions for 2014 is our subject, which we're going to be getting into a debate about. But let's start with something which isn't too contentious at all, which is all the lovely things people have been saying about us on iTunes.
Absolutely. What a great way to start the year. Okay, our first review comes from Cocoa Pops, and it says, great listen. I already have investment properties, but listening to Rob and Rob has helped me realise that sticking to a simple and well-structured strategy can keep you focused and stop you from overcomplicating things. For anyone who has or is considering property investment, they will find these podcasts very informative. Thank you, Cocoa Pops. Jazz says, very informative, especially for a newbie. Packed full of very useful resources. Love the way it's linked to the website and makes it easier to take advantage of all the links available. Thank you, Jazz. And Mark says, excellent, informative and fun. A great podcast from the two likeable and very knowledgeable guys. Rob and Rob clearly have a real passion for property and a real talent for putting it across their topics in a concise, informative and above all entertaining way. They cover a wide range of property investment subjects that will benefit and interest anyone from the novice to the more experienced investor. In addition to their weekly recommendations of books, websites and other podcasts are all top notch and have introduced me to numerous other useful information resources to help my development. There is no hidden agenda or intention to sell to the audience, just two guys who love talking about property in an open and honest way. One of the highlights of my week. Can't recommend this highly enough. Wowzers, Mark, that's a great review. Thank you.
Thank you. Highlight of our week as well. And thank you so much for those reviews. We really appreciate every single one. I know that it can be a bit of a pain to go and navigate the iTunes interface and leave us a review, but we really appreciate it. It makes a huge difference, and we're reading every single one of them out on the show. So if you haven't done yet, make it your New Year's resolution to go and leave us a review on iTunes. And of course, in the show notes, you can find out how to do exactly that.
So rather than what we've done this week, Rob, let's focus on what we've got coming up, because we're not starting the year slowly, are we?
It's not been a relaxing festive period, let's put it that way, because we've just been doing so much work getting things in place for this coming year. There's so much exciting stuff coming up. There is our launch party coming up, of course. It's another listener meetup, which I'm really looking forward to. Thepropertypodcast.com/launch party is the place to sign up for that. But what's it a launch party for? The Property Hub, of course, which is only 1 week away.
It is unbelievable how quickly this has come around. So the 9th of January, head over to thepropertyhub.net and join us. The conversation begins that day. It's open. The doors are swung open. Pile on in. It's going to be fun. We're really looking forward to having everyone there. Then the 11th, we have, as Rob's just mentioned, the launch party, which is not necessarily going to be congas and, punch in the corner. It's more of a meet-up, celebration of the launch, and just a chance for all property investors to get together at the beginning of the new year. Rob and I will probably say a few words, and it'll just be a nice atmosphere to start the year in the right way, networking with like-minded individuals.
It's going to be great. So first couple of weeks of January, traditionally are such a quiet time of the year, not at all for us, but it's going to be great. I'm really excited about everything that's coming up. But talking about what's coming up, our topic of the week this week is price predictions for 2014. So we're going to start the year as we mean to go on by saying a load of stuff which will probably turn out to be wrong in a year's time. But having said that, we should start by what happened in 2013 with property prices. And round of applause for Mr. Beds. Your price predictions were spot on.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. I've stuck my neck out the last 2 years running with property price predictions. And the beginning of last year, I said that property prices would rise between 2 and 4% this year. And the Land Registry, year to date, so it's not quite the year's finished yet, is 3.1%. So bang in the middle of my range. So fluke, luck, or just incredible knowledge? I'll let you decide. I'll link to that blog so you know I'm not making it up. It'll be in the show notes. But there was a few other predictions as well there. The Office for Budget Responsibility said 2.7% growth, so they were very, very close. RICS, Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, said 2%. Hamptons, the big estate agent, 2%. Rightmove, 2%. So everyone was very close. The only ones that were a bit off were Knight Frank, and Knight Frank said 2% decline. I don't know what they were thinking, but obviously not feeling too chirpy the day they made that goal.
But when you get into the breakdown, you could argue that they would be right if they'd ignored the Southeast. Knight Frank, which I'm sure was not their intention. But the 3.1% conceals some regional variations, which we've talked about in the past as well. London romping away, growth of 8.7%. Southeast more broadly, 4%. The East did well as well, 3.2%. Everywhere else performed under inflation, so that's real terms falls. And then there were actual falls in values in the Northwest and the Northeast. So under that headline figure, there was a really mixed picture this year.
There was, and it's going to be an interesting year coming up because there's a lot happening in the property market, and we're going to be discussing that. We've got our experts discussing that as well. The Office of Budget Responsibility expects prices to rise 5.2% in 2014. So we're now looking at the years ahead. So the Office of Budget Responsibility thinks 5.2% rises in 2014 and 7.2%, these are UK averages, in 2015. We know what they think, and they're very well educated. So the people who put that together, and just as well educated, Rob, are our experts that we've asked along this week.
They are. So we're going to be making our own predictions towards the end. So if you want us to put our necks on the line, we will. Stay tuned for that. But we also invited 4 experts, some in the property industry, some just like sort of interested outsiders in related fields. We've asked them to give us their predictions. We got them to record them for us. So let's play the first one now, shall we? This is Mark from Homeshore Properties up in Liverpool.
What's my property price predictions for 2014? Well, in the main, they won't go down. That's a certain. In 2015, we've got an election coming up. So I think that in 2014, the government are just going to keep making it easier and easier and easier for people to buy their own homes. So more buyers means higher prices, which can only be good news for a vendor. Likewise, the government are going to spend heavily in some poorer areas. My business, Homeshore, is based in Liverpool, and in North Liverpool, areas like Anfield and Walton and Bootle are witnessing heavy investment from the government where they're just trying to make the areas nice for people to live. At the moment, the prices in those areas are rock bottom. You can get a decent 2-bed terrace for as low as £25,000. So those values can only go up and up and up. One anomaly may be student house prices. I think they're going to go down with the increase in pods and purpose-built city centre accommodation. Again, sticking with Liverpool, only this week there's been a new purpose-built block given the go-ahead where 600 students are going to be housed. So maybe the owners of these old student-type properties might suffer. But in general, I can only see an increase in confidence in the market and things really moving forwards.
Thank you, Mark. That's brilliant. We really appreciate you taking the time to give us your thoughts and opinions. Some interesting points that Mark's raised there. The election coming up in 2015, something that we're going to touch on in our own predictions, but that's very important to keep that in mind and what's going to happen with the property market. Mark suggests that it's going to make it easier for people to buy their own home because with the election coming up, the government's going to be very much focused on keeping the property market buoyant. Lots of spending in the poorer areas, heavy investment in his particular local area, which are areas like Walton, Anfield and Bootle. In the autumn statement a couple of months ago, the government mentioned that there's going to be £1 billion poured into northern towns and cities to increase home building there as well. So yes, absolutely agree, Mark. There does seem to be a lot of investment heading further north.
So he thinks that in those areas, prices have only got one way to go, but he thinks if anything in his neck of the woods is going to be going the other way, it's student house prices with all those purpose-built blocks and pods, which you're such a fan of, Rob.
Yeah, not a particular fan of pods, but I can see the increase of purpose student blocks going up everywhere, that they may have downward pressure on general student houses. What I mean by that is if you buy a house and rent the rooms out to students, there may be some pressure there, and particularly in Liverpool, Mark's referring to, because that's his home territory. Elections having an influence, lots of spending and investment in poorer areas, prices at rock bottom in those areas now, and he believes there's only one way to go, and student property may not be as attractive in his local area in the coming year. So thank you, Mark. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark. So that was a kind of a local perspective. Let's take a national perspective now. This is Graham Clark from Money Stepper.
Hi, Graham from Money Stepper here. Thanks, Rob and Rob, for asking me for my 2014 property price prediction. After all, predicting the property market couldn't be easier, could it? Just ask John Major in the early 90s or Gordon Brown in 2007. Over at moneystepper.com, we recently explored UK house prices. We concluded that for the past 5 or 6 years, London and the rest of the UK have essentially become two independent markets. Prices have increased in London, but they have actually fallen outside of London when compared to inflation. So, what will happen in 2014? Well, a strengthening economy, the contribution of the Help to Buy scheme, and the fact that the Bank of England are taking action to restrict prices increasing too much, all suggest to me that prices outside of London will start to increase at rates above inflation in 2014. All of this is supported by reasonable affordability, with interest rates not rising. Well, not rising yet, I hasten to add. London may be a different story. Prices in the last couple of years have increased at a rate higher than those that led to the 2007 crash. Unsustainable growth, some may say. So, given that London has been moving in the opposite direction to the rest of the UK now for 6 years, I think that in 2014 it may begin to fall in line with the wider UK market. For more detail and insight, head on over to moneystepper.com and check out our recent series of articles on the UK housing market. To all you homeowners and investors alike, good luck in 2014.
Thank you, Graham. So Graham is focusing on an issue which is kind of the big issue, really, isn't it? It's like London's been out on its own for 6 years. He says it can't continue, but then some other people might argue that it's such a powerhouse, it's just going to keep going and going. Graham thinks, though, that London is going to be softening and kind of coming into line with the rest of the UK. And as part of that, he thinks that the north is going to start picking up those areas which have seen declines over 2013 are going to start picking up and seeing rises above inflation. So thank you again to Graham. We used some of his excellent analysis in a recent episode. He seems to be a man with his finger on the pulse. We'll see how that pans out.
Okay, next up, how could we not have an episode without Pete Matthew? And Pete Matthew, friend of the show, also produces the excellent Meaningful Money podcast. Let's listen to what he's got to say.
Hi, Rob and Rob. Pete Matthew from the Meaningful Money podcast here. Property prices for 2014? Well, I'm not convinced that there is any such thing as a property bubble, despite what the popular press might say. Certainly not when you take a national average and the fact that there are still relatively few property transactions actually happening. More than there was, of course, but still, it's tough to take an average when there's so little activity in relative terms. I do wonder if some people might be concerned about the spectre of increased interest rates, but I reckon that's still very much on the horizon, but that might stall things a little bit. Basically, I reckon 2014 is going to be largely flat, so I'm going to put a maximum increase in property prices at 2% for next year. I wonder if I'll be right. The stock market, though, is another question entirely. Wishing everybody at the Property Podcast, all your listeners, a very Merry Christmas. Keep up the great work, Rob and Rob. You're doing fantastic stuff. More power to you. Cheers.
Thank you, Pete. Really appreciate it. So Pete believes at the moment there's no property bubble. Okay, the transactions are still low, and they are. Historically, they are still low compared to where they were. They have improved, as he mentions, but they are still low. And 2014, he feels, is going to be relatively flat with maximum growth of 2%. We'll come on to our own predictions at the end. I would say there certainly has been a property bubble in London, but Pete's obviously talking about nationally there. So to be fair to Pete, that's the interesting thing about the UK market. As Graham mentioned from Money Stepper, there really have been two different markets, London and outside of London. We'll come together with our own views later at the show, but Pete makes some excellent points there.
He does. Thank you, Pete. Finally, let's go to our last expert. This is Vanessa Warwick from a site we've recommended many times in the past, Property Tribes. Let's hear what she's got to say.
Hello everybody, it's Vanessa Warwick, landlord and co-founder of Property Tribes, and thank you to the Property Podcast for asking me to share my thoughts on property price rises in 2014. I'd much rather be talking about cash flow prospects in 2014 because without cash flow, it's unlikely that we can remain in the property game long enough to be able to benefit from any capital growth. But if price rises are the topic of the day, then I think it's fair to say that London and the South East are going to be the powerhouses of capital growth in the UK. And in fact, it was recently reported that property prices in the South East are going to outperform London over the next 5 years. And that's the first time that this has happened in over a decade. So for the South East, I think that we will enjoy some minor capital growth. I'm a big fan of holiday lets, and I believe that coastal property will continue to do well because self-catering accommodation is the biggest current trend around the world in the tourism industry, and that bodes well for holiday lets, particularly those on the coast. So if you're in London and the South East, I would expect 5 to 7% capital growth next year. Up north, I think it will be flat.
So Vanessa makes a great point there, which is that we're talking about prices because capital gains are always going to be a consideration in property investment. It's an exciting thing to speculate about at the start of a new year, but we can't ignore cash flow. That is the real key. You've got to have that money in your pocket every month. That's the stuff that you can bank on. You know that's going to happen. You want to protect that and see capital growth as a bonus. So that's something that we need to remember while we're talking about all this stuff. Vanessa's point of view seems to be the opposite of what Graham had to say. She sees that the South and London will be growing 5 to 7% in the coming year, whereas the North is going to be more flat. So she's of the school of thought that London, the powerhouse, is just going to keep on going and going, and the rest of the country is going to be further behind. So it'll be interesting to see which of those perspectives, if either, turns out to be correct. And she tips holiday lets as an interesting investment to look at as well.
Okay, so thank you to our experts. We really appreciate you taking the time to give us your thoughts and your opinions. Thank you very much. But Rob, are you ready? Let's stick our necks in the line and let's give what we think is going to happen for the coming year. Okay.
Well, it's only fair that as you were so accurate last year that you go first again, because you're clearly the man to listen to.
Obviously. Right, okay. So let's have a look. Help to Buy. 2014 for me will be the year that Help to Buy really has an impact. So it started to have an influence on the property market, but I really think it'll get into full flow next year. We have got to really think about where these areas are going to affect most. I think the Help to Buy will have the biggest impact on northern properties just because of the price levels. I've mentioned this before, but if you're looking at a home and it's 100,000 and you only need to get 5,000 together to get on the ladder, it's not a lot of money. Yes, £5,000 is still, something that needs to be saved up, but it's achievable. And I think more and more people will find that achievable next year and will work to get on the property ladder. So I think that will have upward pressures on all aspects of the market, particularly further north. So that being said, I don't believe London will no longer lead the way. I don't believe that London will be the powerhouse that it's been. I don't believe it's going to crash. I just don't think it's going to be the strongest performer next year. That's probably the riskiest prediction I'm going to make here. I think some other areas will outperform London. The commuter towns, so we'll call them the South East. And I think other areas have the potential, Yorkshire, Midlands, Northwest as well, to do very well. It'll be interesting to see what happens, but I don't think that London will lead the way next year because I just think that after such a long period of growth, it's unsustainable. Now, whether that happens next year or the year after, we'll have to wait and see. It doesn't mean that London's a bad investment. It's just I don't bank on big gains over the next few years. A couple of things to add. I think the election that Mark mentioned as well will have a big impact on property prices because I think the government really wants the property market to perform well up until the election. So that being said, I don't think there's going to be any major change to the Help to Buy scheme unless the property market gets really heated. Certainly not for the first 6 months. And I don't think interest rates will change. Now, I can hear people going, but the government don't control interest rates. Yes, maybe not directly, but they certainly have an influence on the Bank of England. I don't think interest rates will rise in 2014 either. So a lot of predictions here, a lot of general things, but I'm going to really stick my neck on the line and I'm going to give you a number. I gave you a number last year and I'm going to give you a number this year. I think the UK property market, on average, will grow 4 to 5%. And I think I'm being conservative. I'm going to go 4 to 5% next year, UK average. I wouldn't be surprised, though, if it ends up at 6, but I'll go small this year. I said 2 to 4 last year. I'll just bring it down to 1 percentage point, 4 to 5% UK average. There you go. I've said it.
Wow. Okay. Well, I really appreciate all our experts putting their necks on the line with their predictions. You've done it as well. I suppose I should. I think I broadly agree with the consensus in that we're going to see the best growth in the areas that have struggled as we start seeing residential buyers return to the market, help to buy, all that kind of thing. I think we can agree that with the election coming up next year, the feel-good factor is going to be there. The government will be wanting everyone to feel secure in the value of their home if they've already got one, and they'll want them to be kind of getting into their own home if they've been sort of struggling for the last 5-7 years to do so. The big question is, can London keep growing? It seems unlikely that London can keep outpacing the rest of the UK, but then you could equally have said that for every year for the last 10 years. There's a really great blog called monovator.com, and the guy who writes that for the last 10 years, he's been saying, prices in London are ridiculous. I'm not going to buy now. They're going to come crashing down any minute, and then I'll get in there. And every year he just gets more and more annoyed at how wrong he was and how much money it's cost him. And now he can't get on the ladder at all. I think that's a really valid point. So London prices might seem unsustainable, but you could have argued that for a long time. So I'm going to say that London is not going to fall. That could potentially happen at some point as all the international investors pull money out into other asset classes. This year, I'm going to say that it's going to keep pace with the rest of the UK. So we're probably going to see less of a kind of a 2-speed housing market than we did in 2013. It's more like similar growth in all areas. As for an actual number, I'm just going to back a winner. If the OBR last year was the closest, I'm going to go with them. They said 5.2%. I'm going to go 5.5.
Oh, you know what? I'm jealous. I should have gone with 5.5. I think you're right. Can I do 4 to 6?
No.
Rob, again, surprise, surprise, we're very close in our predictions, not just the number, but what we think is going to happen. Although I may have sounded a little negative on London there, I actually do think that the levels will be very similar. I just don't think London will be that powerhouse anymore. And it sounds like you believe similar things. I think the rest of the UK will start to perform quite strongly next year too. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we can only wait and see.
We can. And it's worth saying, what a turnaround from when we first started this podcast back in, what was it, like March or something like that, 2013. It was just doom and gloom all round. And there's been such a kind of a turnaround in perception during that time. So anything could happen. We could end up looking very silly.
The good news is, because we're going to be so keen to see who was right and wrong by the end of the year, it means we're going to carry on doing the podcast for the rest of the year. So there's the good news. You got another year's commitment from us, because there's no way I'm not going to stop before then, because I'm so competitive.
So we'll see how that pans out. But if you want to contribute your own prediction, let us know what you think. Get over to thepropertypodcast.com, find the show notes for episode number 42. Let us know what you think is going to happen during 2014. And thank you once again to all 4 of our guest experts, Mark, Graham, Pete and Vanessa, who also generously put their predictions out there along with ours.
Fantastic. Okay, so our resource of the week, we've begun 2014, so we've got a very serious resource to start the year off. No, of course we haven't.
Yeah, let's start as we mean to go on, shall we? So the resource this week comes courtesy of our friend Ed Lamb, who sends us terriblerealestateagentphotos.com. I think that's one of those names that tells you exactly what it is. No further discussion necessary other than to say some of this stuff has to be seen to be believed.
Hey, every time I go on this website, tears roll down my face through laughter. It's just so funny. Just can't believe these people can stay in business, but I'm glad they are, because it brings laughter to us all. So go to terriblerealestateagentphotos.com. We'll link to it in the show notes, of course. If you've got 5 minutes on a coffee break and you fancy a giggle or maybe an absolute howl, then get over to this website, because it's absolutely brilliant. Thanks, Ed, for sending it through.
Yeah, it is just amazing. So next week, we're going to be talking about another hot topic at the moment, which is interest rates. We're going to be talking about what could be coming up in terms of interest rates and what it means for you as an investor.
Absolutely. Well, I look forward to that one. I know that's a very hot topic, as you say, Rob. So that just leaves us to say, make sure you sign up for the launch party. Go to thepropertypodcast.com/launch party. And remember, the Property Hub is only days away from opening. So put it in your calendars. Make sure you're there. We want to see you in there. We'll be in there all day, chatting away to everyone who comes to join us. We really look forward to it.
We do. So we will see you next Thursday. Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to The Property Podcast. Make sure you join our mailing list at thepropertypodcast.com.
And remember, we love 5-star reviews. Rob even loves them more than air miles.